Okay, in this lecture, we'll be talking about functions and events in JavaScript and how to make our pages interactive with users and to change the appearance of things, to make things appear, disappear, get information from users in a different way. So using the example that we had in our last lesson where we talked about functions, you'll see that we've got this function called slope set up. And in it, we're asking window.prompts, and then we're going to use a document.write. We're using window.prompts to get the input, and then we're using document.write to show the output, just so that we remember how this works. I'll refresh it over here. And when I say the change in x is 5 and the change in y is 6, then it tells me 1.2 is the slope because 6 divided by 5 is 1.2. Not as useful as I would like it to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to change a couple of things here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an input in the body, and that input is going to have it's going to have an ID which is equal to change in x, and it's going to have a name, of course, which is equal to change in x, and we're going to give it a type equals text, and I'll put a label out here. I'll say change in x. And at the end of the line, we'll put a PR tag. And then we'll do a similar setup here, change in y. Change in y. Name is change in y. And again, type is going to be equal to text. I could make that a number input if I wanted to as well. PR tag wrong up here. Okay. Then I'm going to input a button tag which says get slope. Okay, so the first thing that's going to happen is instead of calling the slope directly in a script, which makes it happen automatically, we're going to use an event in here that says onClick equals slope. What that means is when I click this button, it calls the slope function, and there it is, asking me for the change in x and asking me for the change in y. So that's the first thing that we're going to change up here is instead of getting change in x from a window.prompt, and instead of getting change in y from a window.prompt now, we want to get them from these inputs where the users are giving us input. And to do that, we use something called the document object model. And the way we access that is we say document get element by ID. And then I name the ID of the thing that I want. Well, the thing that I want is this input box, which has an ID of change in x. And then I say dot value, and that's going to get me that value. And so I do the same thing here, document dot get element by ID, change in y dot value. And now what's going to happen is instead of those pop-ups happening, a user comes in here and they say, okay, the change in y is 5, the change in x is 5, the change in y is 6, and I say get slope, and there's my same 1.2. Technically, it should, of course, parse int this as well, because that's good programming practice to turn my numbers into numbers. But either way, it's happening. And now I'm going to go one step further. And what we're going to do is down here, we're going to put a div that's empty. And instead of doing a document.write, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say document.get element by ID. Now, I'm trying to access this div, but the div doesn't have an ID. So I'm going to give it one. I'm going to say ID equals result. Pick the name. Could have been Bob. I picked result. And so I'm going to type result here. And I'm going to say inner HTML equals. And now I'm going to write a set of quotes and I'm going to write HTML that I want to go into that spot. And so I'm going to say slope, and then I'm going to push on change in Y divided by change in X. So now watch what happens. I put in my 5, I put in my 6, I call get slope, and now it appears right below there. All right. It appears right in what we're talking about. I'm getting an error here, and that's because up here I used capitals, and otherwise in the other place I didn't. So of course you should always be as consistent as you can in making your variables because it avoids problems like this. Let's try that one more time. 5, 6, get slope, and it tells me the slope is 1, not giving me my 1. Oh, it did, yeah, not giving me 1. Change in X there as well. Sorry. 5, 6. And now it tells me that the slope is 1.2. So now I'm doing this, right inside of the document. I don't have to have all these pop-ups going on. So a couple notes that are happening here. All right. First, to get you, sorry, to get user input from a form input, you need to make sure that the input tag has an ID, right? So that's the first thing that happens. Then here, right here, what we're doing is we're saying, all right, we can apply an event such as on click to an element like a button. Could be a div, it could be an image, it could be anything. I could put that on click on anything. And set it equal to a JavaScript function, which will be called when that event happens. And so I'm calling slope, and then I come up here in slope, and we say to get the value from an input, we use document.getElement by ID, and in here we put in quotes the input ID, and then we say dot value, and that's how I'm getting the value. And then this line right here is the one we're using for output. The output information, create an element, that's our div, with an ID, and use inner HTML equals, again, called off document dot get element by ID. So it's document dot get element by ID of target dot inner HTML equals, and then I can push in any HTML in quotes here, H2 title H2. I can push in any HTML that I want, and it's going to get pushed into that thing. Now, this is an interesting piece here, and that is that when I come and I look at the source code of this, it looks just like I wrote it. There's no changes. However, if instead of looking at the source code, I do what's called inspecting, all right, and I look at um, the HTML here, which seems to be, there it is. Move some of this stuff down out of my way a little bit. Sorry about this. There we go. Um, then when I open this up, it actually is going to start to show me the code that is being generated here, and that's a really neat thing, that I can see the result that slope 1.2 got pushed in there. Now earlier when I was having a problem, and I had these things written incorrectly and it wasn't working, had I had this inspector open, sometimes we can get an error in the console. Now, this one's not giving me an error, but sometimes we get an error in the console. So that's a nice thing to check. But again, the nice thing about the inspector view is that it's going to actually show me the changes in the document. Okay. So that's a pretty big thing. All right. Let's talk about a couple other events and a couple other things that we can do. So I'm going to just put an HR in here. And the nice thing is that this code that's up here, unlike when we have the alerts and the window.prompts, that's not going to do anything unless I interact with it. Well, I'm not going to interact with it anymore right now. I'm going to do something else. So under this HR, I'm going to put a div and I'm going to give it an ID of target. Um, and then I'm going to style it as well. So let me come up here into the head and run a style here. And so the thing is called ID target. And what we're going to do is we're going to give it a width of 100 pixels and a height of 100 pixels and a background color of blue and a color of white. All right, so there's my box. Now I'm going to assign several different um, events to this. So the first one that I'm going to do is I'm going to say on click equals click div. Okay. And then I'm going to come up here into the head script and I'm going to write a function called click div. And in that, I'm going to do document dot get element by ID, and that was called target. And I'm going to say dot inner HTML equals you clicked me. Okay. And so we click here, we click there, and now it says you clicked me. Great. Now I'm going to put an additional piece on this, and it's going to be an on mouse over. And on mouse over, I'm going to call a function called go green. And so up here, I've got to write that function now. Go green, and in there again, I'm going to get the thing document dot get element by ID target. And this time I'm going to store it in a variable. So the variable div is equal to document.getElementById target. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say div dot style dot background color. Now notice the difference that I am using the background color style the same way that I use background color up here, but the difference is that when I write it in CSS, I use a dash. And if I'm writing a dashed style inside of JavaScript, I get rid of the dash and I use camel casing. And so you can see lowercase b background, capital C color, and I'm going to set that now equal to green. Okay. And so now I come over here, and when I roll over that div, it turns green. And when I click it, it still says you clicked me. I'm going to put one more function on it, and it's going to be on mouse out equals go yellow. And yes, you guessed it. We're going to change it to yellow when we leave. This time just the text color though. So go yellow. And I'm going to say document get element by ID target dot style dot color equals yellow. And so now it's blue. I roll over, it turns green. I click it, it says you clicked me. I roll out, and that you clicked me then becomes yellow. I can change any styles that I want here. So I can come back in here now, and this is the benefit of having it stored as a variable from the beginning, is I don't have to write all this again. Because now I can just do div dot style dot width equals 200 pixels. Now it's going to be again on rollover is where it's turning green. Well, bam, there it is. Bam, now it's 200 pixels wide. Not only can I change the thing that I'm operating on, but I can also change something else. So let me put an H2 on here. It says see me, right? And so we'll see it. And now when I roll out, okay, on this go yellow function. Not really a great function name anymore because I'm going to do more stuff to it. But what I'm going to do now is this H2, I'm going to give an ID equal to see me. And in here, I'm going to say document dot get element by ID, see me, dot style dot text decoration equals underline. So now I roll over it and it becomes green, and then watch this see me as I roll off, it gets underlined. Okay. So I can control other things as I'm doing this as well. Um, the last thing that I want to show you is I'm going to make a change here. I'm going to take that see me that we have and I'm going to set it to display none. Now we've talked about display before. We can use display inline, display block, display inline block. So now I'm going to set this to display none, which is going to hide it from the beginning. And then instead of changing its text decoration to underline, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say style dot display equals block. So when I roll over this, nothing happens, but when I roll off, then see me appears. So if I come up into the go green one and I say document get element by ID see me style dot display equals none. Now when I roll off, it appears. When I roll onto this, it disappears. So I'm actually controlling the appearance of that by rolling on and off. I can, there's so the ideas here are limitless with just a couple of quick things that we can do. And so once again, just to kind of go back over it again, I've got these three events: on click, on mouse over, and on mouse out, each of which is going to call a function. In each of those things, I can do document.get element by ID and then call dot style and use any of the styles that I want to change colors or anything those. But I can also use a display to make things appear and disappear. Some people do that with visibility. I prefer not to do that because it leaves space, whereas appear and display actually gets rid of the space, so there's no space being held for it. So that's our lecture here on functions and events. And so what you're going to want to do next is you're going to want to go out to the site. So let's make this big here. And you're going to go out to the site, cs.me, and we go to your course and we go into JavaScript and we come down here to Introduction to Events. And of course, under more info, you're going to see other lecture code. Besides this, you're going to see an events example. You'll see all these different tutorials and things that are online. You'll see the notes that are here, which talk about a lot of the same things that I just talked about. And then there's a bunch of practice problems. I strongly encourage you to do as many of these practice problems as you can across as many levels as you can because it's going to give you some really some really great information and some great practice with these skills of writing functions and using events to make things happen on the page. I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you next time.